Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now March 8th of 2024, and given that all divisions over at the Walt Disney Company are really failing and continuing to show no signs of a resolution at all, and the worst of course goes for Marvel Studios and Lucasfilm, but focusing on Marvel Studios, we know that it's not just Bob Iger at fault here. A lot of it has to do with Kevin Feige making all the wrong decisions across the board, and how that in turn is being supported by, of course, the Disney heads like the board of directors and Bob Iger, the CEO. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. So, we already know that Disney is banking on Deadpool 3, aka Deadpool and Wolverine, to at least make a decent profit at the movie theaters, right? At the box office. They want to make sure that this movie at least does an okay job. This way, 2024, as far as theatrical releases go, won't be a total failure for this year, because it's going to be a very empty and barren year to begin with for Disney before they actually go with their expensive failures next year. Now, interestingly enough, we know that there's a lot of drama happening behind the scenes with Deadpool 3, and there has been for a couple of months now. Everything related to the reshoots and Bob Iger's push for enhancing DEI in the third act of Deadpool 3 to kind of give the final act of the movie a big turn to kind of fit Disney's overall agenda. That's what I like to call a bait and switch, by the way. You know, you got the first two acts that are going to be reportedly just fine, and then come the third act, everything changes. But let's get into all of this, shall we? Now, specifically, with all divisions at the Walt Disney Company already heading into damage control from Bob Iger, the entire situation at Disney recently got even worse when it involves Marvel Studios. One major development involves the gender-swapped Wolverine situation that recently occurred behind the scenes for Deadpool 3, and something that was planned for reshoots to last until May of this year. And though Ryan Reynolds and his team have had many victories and losses by facing Disney head-to-head, one of their recent victories had to do with the destruction of a gender-swapped version of Wolverine, and how Ryan Reynolds fell into heated arguments behind the scenes. As it turns out, in this crucial update to what happened, Ryan Reynolds completely disagreed with Kevin Feige's approach to use a brand new character from a different universe to justify the introduction of a female Wolverine. The heated argument that Ryan had with those high up at Disney, like Bob Iger for example, is that they could have easily used Lady Deathstrike or X-23 for the scene in which the gender-swapped version of Wolverine beats Jackman's version as a brutal, of course, fight. Now, leaving him defenseless is the overall plan that was actually pushed by both Bob Iger and Kevin Feige in the actual sequence. Another reason why Reynolds was furious with Disney and the heads is that they were actually using the introduction of a female Wolverine, which was a literal gender-swapped version, to add in comic relief with a series of dialogue that would promote Disney's DEI agenda in the third act of the film. The plan was to shoot everything in studio and not on location for the scene in which female Wolverine defeats Jackman's version in a beat-for-beat repeat of how X-24 defeated Jackman's Wolverine in the film Logan by piercing him through a pointed edge of a tree/log. The reason why Reynolds, Sean Levy, and even Hugh Jackman himself began entering into heated exchanges with the Disney heads was that Kevin Feige wanted to rewrite history, that the gender-swapped Wolverine would actually take the place of X-24 in the film Logan that led to the defeat of his character. Another mutant was planned to step in and defeat the gender-swapped version and somehow reverses the timeline to bring things back to the way they were. Now, these reshoots that were planned and all mapped out by Kevin Feige and pressed on writers like Paul Wernick and Rhett Reese were eventually all cancelled and killed due to Ryan Reynolds creating serious arguments with both Bob Iger and Kevin Feige of Marvel Studios in multiple remote meetings related, of course, to last-minute reshoots, which, by the way, are still officially happening. However, this entire plan specifically was recently wrecked by Reynolds and his team after many battles against Disney and standing up for their own film. Now, Reynolds' original pitch was that he wanted Lady Deathstrike and Wolverine to have a massive rematch in the third act, but Disney refused to do that for reshoots, at least for the scene, and that's when Kevin Feige quickly came up with a plan for a gender-swapped Wolverine. Now, guys, let me stop here for a second. Now, once again, I cannot, stress this enough. I really have to really say this again. Basically what Disney was doing was that they wanted to create an actual gender-swapped version of Wolverine. This is not to be mistaken with any kind of character that's similar to Wolverine in the comics. This was 100% going to be and aimed for as an original character that would be from another universe. Now, we already know that Kevin Feige and Bob Iger are using the multiverse as a way to justify the concept of race swapping and gender swapping. We already know that the big argument behind the scenes that happened between Marvel Studios and those like Ryan Reynolds is that if it's from a multiverse or another universe, specifically, then it should be a non-issue about swapping of race and gender for specific key characters. That's Kevin Feige's argument, and I think it's a very poor argument at that. You're still promoting your agenda, you're just using an example of a storyline element to justify your push for an agenda, basically, is what it boils down to. Now, again, we know that Deadpool 3 is going through some fine-tuning right now. Reshoots are about to happen by the beginning of April. It's going to last until May before its introduction in July in movie theaters. And I think at the end of the day, you're going to see this movie really kind of flip-flopping in certain areas where it's going to have good moments and bad moments. But let's hope for the best that Ryan Reynolds, Shawn Levy, and the writers get more victories than losses throughout this entire process against Disney, and that this movie turns out to be quite okay. Now, moving onwards, alright, now this scene was written and even rehearsed before its cancellation, thanks to Ryan Reynolds and Shawn Levy for making multiple ultimatums against Bob Iger of Disney. Already, Ryan's fight for preventing DEI from entering into the film has taken focus away from what's important for the actual story itself and its production cycle. So that's another thing, is that this movement by Bob Iger, in this battle, if you will, it's literally stripping the focus away for Ryan Reynolds to focus on what really matters in this movie, and that, of course, is editing a good movie together, getting this movie wrapped up before July, and promoting it well enough to the point where they can actually get this out to pretty much the entire general public that's interested in Deadpool. And they also want to create new fans. I mean, that's another important issue that Ryan is trying to tackle right now, is that they want to create new fans with Deadpool and Wolverine that may have not seen the first two films. So that's another thing and challenge that he's trying to break through as we speak. But again, this push for gender swapping is just becoming a more regular thing, especially race swapping. I mean, we all saw what they did with Velma in the Velma series on HBO Max. Who can forget that? That's just another example, not connected to Disney, by the way. But we have a lot of things here that we will eventually talk about. We know that Bob Iger is still pushing for gender-swapped Wolverine in X-Men, of course, 97, Season 2. They're still pushing for that, but I digress. I would love to hear, you all have to say about this entire scenario between Ryan, Shawn, and the Disney heads. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.